In my Echoes of Wisdom review, I said that the game's timeline placement deserved its own separate video. Well, this is it. Yeah, this is it. First things first, obviously there are spoilers for the game in this video. This is a story and lore discussion after all, so the whole thing is gonna be spoiled here. Watch at your own risk. I've seen a lot of theories go around on when exactly this game takes place on the timeline, and while most of the ones I've seen are probably correct, they also missed a very important detail that makes things a little bit more complicated than they might seem. Before we talk about where it probably goes, let's first address where it absolutely cannot go. First, the child timeline. The main reason is because of the presence of the Great Deku Tree. If you've played Ocarina of Time, you know that the Deku Tree is dead at that point in the series, and since Child Link has never defeated Phantom Ganon in the Forest Temple, the Deku Tree sprout has not started to grow back in this timeline. Therefore, this one is out of the question. It also cannot go in the adult timeline simply because there will not be a Deku Tree there either. Hyrule has been reformed on a different continent than the one in Ocarina of Time, and unless the Deku Tree is secretly an Ent from Lord of the Rings, there's no way for him to leave this place and follow our heroes. It means that the only option we have is the Downfall timeline. The question now is, where exactly could it be in there? Most people I've seen place it after Triforce Heroes, which is reasonable. I've seen others place it after the Oracle games, which is also a decent placement, but how did people arrive to that conclusion? The main reason I've seen so far is because of the reused map from both A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds, which makes sense. However, there is one last thing we need to consider before coming to a conclusion, and it has to do with the main villain of the game. From what we learn, Noel, the villain of Echoes of Wisdom, has been around since before the creation of the world. It was trapped inside Earth by the goddesses when they created it, or whatever planet this is supposed to be, and then the tries were made to stop the entity from devouring this new world from the inside. Jump to the present, aka during Echoes of Wisdom. Noel found a way to bypass this failsafe and start consuming the world again, and Zelda and Link worked together to defeat the evil entity and save the world. But the thing is, Noel's existence or his comeback plan isn't dependent on which timeline the game takes place in. Let's take a look at the timeline again, it'll be easier to understand what I mean. Noel was trapped inside the world at the very beginning of the world's creation, at the start of the timeline. At some point in the Downfall timeline, we'll say here for now, Noel gets his plan going and Echoes of Wisdom happens. Just to keep things simple, let's say that the game takes place 1,000 years after the timeline split at the end of Ocarina of Time. But like I said, Noel's reappearance isn't dependent on anything that happens in between the creation of the world and Echoes of Wisdom. Nothing that happened in that timeline, or any of the three really, has any impact on Noel's plan at all. With that in mind, we can only deduce that Noel will eventually do its thing no matter which timeline you're in. So if Echoes of Wisdom takes place 1,000 years after Ocarina of Time in the Downfall timeline, then Noel will come back 1,000 years after Ocarina of Time in every other timeline as well. Okay, 1,007 in the case of the child timeline. If we really think about it, unless we assume that some other versions of Link and Zelda end up saving the world over there as well, these other timelines are cooked! They're done! Noel ends the world when it comes back and it's just over, it's GG's for Hyrule. There could be another game or two in those other timelines, but unless we get a confirmation that Noel was defeated in them, they're toast. So what does this all mean? Well, I think it's in our best interest to assume that Echoes of Wisdom takes place as far in the Downfall timeline as it can. As much as I agree that the logical placement seems to be after Triforce Heroes, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of it taking place after Zelda 2. Unfortunately, this placement does have its problems. Now, I've been around timeline theories regarding this series before we had an official one, and one of the things that stuck out to me was that geography was generally not reliable enough to determine a game's placement. What I mean by this is something like how Lake Hylia is in the bottom left corner of the map in one game, but on the bottom right corner of the map in another one doesn't really mean much. The most important things to look at, I think, will always be the events of the main quest. However, as much as I do believe that geography doesn't really matter when it comes to timeline placement, it's kind of a different beast altogether when the same exact map is being reused. We've had two previous examples in the series of Nintendo reusing a map, and both times, they were confirmed to be direct sequels. Plus, there's a contradiction with Zelda 2's backstory that would prevent Echoes of Wisdom from taking place after it. For those who don't know, the citizens of Hyrule moved north from where the kingdom used to be sometime before Zelda 1, which is why Death Mountain is located at the bottom of the map in the second game. I know I just said that geography shouldn't matter, but we do see the Zelda 1 map in its sequels. It's this area right here. It may not look like it at first glance, but it is in fact a scaled down version of Zelda 1's overworld map. Because of this, I'd say it kinda matters more than usual for this specific situation. It's a similar enough case to the series reusing its own map that I feel like it should hold some weight in this equation. Zelda 2 only takes place a year after Zelda 1, I believe, so it's not like there are hundreds or thousands of years separating both games like there are for most of the others. On that note, during my research for this video, I came across this picture showing that Zelda 1's map is supposedly located in the mountain area of A Link to the Past. I can kinda see it, but it definitely seems like a stretch to me. If true though, it would only strengthen the argument. The problem here is that the recycled map used in Echoes of Wisdom gives us an expanded version of A Link to the Past's map in every direction except north. It wouldn't make too much sense for the kingdom to have shrunk back down to what it used to be back in those days, now would it? This is what I believe to be the biggest problem with placing Echoes of Wisdom after Zelda 2. Besides that, Echoes doesn't really conflict with any other game when it comes to its lore shenanigans, so it can really happen anywhere in there besides in the middle of known direct sequels, obviously. It's kind of funny how this game seems to have more impact on the other timelines than its own. In the end, I think the most likely scenario is that the game takes place after Triforce Heroes, but longer after it than we might have thought. Unless we want to assume that there's no future for the child or adult timelines, or unless we see Null again after Echoes of Wisdom, which I highly doubt we will. Some people might want to bring up Maladus as a counterexample, but that one needed a compatible body for his complete resurrection, and he couldn't get the one he needed until New Hyrule was founded, so we can argue that some of the events taking place in that timeline did have an impact on what ended up happening. With all that said, that's all I got for you guys today. A bit of a shorter one, but I still hope you liked it. If you did, do the things the algorithm likes. You all know what those are by now, and be sure to tell me what you think about this whole timeline situation thing. Am I correct? Am I totally off? Where do you think it goes in there? Like I said, I think it goes after Triforce Heroes, but it can always change with future games. Give me your thoughts in the comments. I will read it. And thanks everyone for watching. See you next time, guys.